We are live with the Post Daily News Show. It is Thursday, June the 9th. I am John Pollock alongside Wai Ting. Live. Hello, Wai.
We are live. We are here. What's going on, John? How you doing?
It's going okay. It's going okay. Everyone's favorite segment, the Toronto weather update. Started off all right, and then we were hit with some rain today, and things have settled.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for that.
I want you to know just hour by hour how things are going outside.
Well, I was just out there, so I'm well
Okay.
aware. But thank you for the. I'm sure our audience, worldwide.
Let's move on. Is the man is telling me. So let's get into all of the news as we start off with Roman Reigns, who SI was reporting this on Thursday, and we were able to confirm this as well. He is not scheduled any longer for Money in the Bank on July 2nd. He will not be going to the intimate confines of the MGM Grand Garden Arena, and it looks like this changed after the move from Allegiant Stadium. He was part of the original advertising, and as it had been reported in the Observer, that Reigns had kind of like three opponents lined up for these shows with Riddle, Randy Orton, and Drew McIntyre. And obviously they are going forward with this. They had Riddle issue like the challenge, so I would imagine, Wai, that gets earmarked for television, and you would assume that Reigns is still on course for SummerSlam and Clash at the Castle, where they've already shot the angle with Drew making that challenge for 3 months from now.
Yeah, I mean, judging by this schedule, I mean, it seems like Reigns at this point seems to be saved for these stadium shows. Yet seemingly also this Riddle defense taking place on TV as well. So maybe does it show you maybe what their priorities are? You know,
I think it's a balance. I think people are looking at this, that certainly the timing of putting both your championships on someone that is now getting a reduced schedule. This is not just like house shows, but also less of your premium live events on top of it. Like you can make the argument that for Money in the Bank, it's a show that is sold out at the smaller venue that they're running, and if you want to spread out and put a Reigns on television instead for a big match, like that is, this is not like the prior era where television builds to the live events and to pay-per-views. Like television is its own function, and
what is the function of a premium live event?
I think it is. I think you have tiers of premium live events. You have your biggest one, which is WrestleMania. Then you have, I would say, like the Saudi Arabia shows are right below that. And then and these stadium shows that are on par with that. And then you have these lower end shows like we just saw with Hell in a Cell that, I mean, they ran this show. They put out the stat that this was like the most watched Hell in a Cell. And so they're on a larger platform in Peacock. So that's going to grow that number. And that's, I think, what we're going to see from now on, like these staggered premium live events that are sectioned off into tiers. And Money in the Bank, obviously, once it moved from the stadium, it became a lower tiered show for them that did not require a Roman Reigns.
Yeah, and to be quite honest, in the grand scheme of things, is it going to make a big difference to Peacock whether or not Roman is on this show versus not being on the show? I'm not so sure. We don't exactly know what the Roman Reigns deal is, and I mean, it must be, must have been quite the negotiation for him to go from pretty much appearing on every single show to now not even appearing, 2 pay-per-views in a row, PLEs in a row. I apologize. So, but like if you're Peacock, I think all you're really looking at is, well, how many shows is WWE providing us? And then maybe every so often at this point, seemingly like, almost like a few times a year now going forward, maybe having one of these big attractions in a Roman Reigns is enough to satisfy them.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to look back at this weekend, which I think unquestionably it was the news of Cody in that last 24 hours that really made that show much more important and must-see. If we took that injury out of the equation, I mean, that was a show that had very little interest going into it. And, with both of your championships on your one guy that is not appearing on every weekly television, is not on every monthly show. I mean, it does raise the question of like where you are going from here. And if you're going to plot out this summer, it's okay, you look at Riddle, that I think everyone sees where that one goes on television. You have Randy Orton, and then Drew McIntyre is the very interesting one in Cardiff. That, I mean, maybe that is the time, like, you do a big title change, even if it's going to be a short-lived one, and Drew drops it back to Roman in time for WrestleMania season. Like, I cannot fathom doing Roman and Drew in that stadium in Wales, and you beat Drew. I mean, it just to me would be such a deflating end, as opposed to, okay, like, you've had the 2-year run, like, have Drew get a big win. It elevates him greatly. You have all summer to build for this match. And Drew doesn't have to have it a year-long reign. He can lose it back at the end of the year or in January, and then you go with Roman against Cody or someone at WrestleMania. You can get things back on track. I think, like, you have extended this title reign to be of utmost significance, and now it does need to benefit other people too.
It's almost too bad that Cardiff show isn't earlier in the schedule, say this month, or maybe even, ahead of SummerSlam. That way, I think it seems like, to me, the most likely person in that list of, between Riddle and Orton and Drew McIntyre to take the championship is obviously Drew McIntyre in his home, or at least, I don't know, area, I suppose. So it's too bad that they kind of have to keep the belt on Roman until then. It makes the whole thing really, really quite perplexing. The fact that he's renegotiated this particular schedule right now, right after basically taking both belts. I mean, it's only going to create more negative sentiment, I think, perhaps towards the WWE than for their decision making. And yeah, like you figure, like, with Cody now absent, whether or not they would have sped things up by bringing Roman back a bit earlier, and obviously not, not at least not for this cycle.
I mean, you could also look at it like from the perspective strictly of the fan that maybe does not have Peacock, and the idea that you are going to do this Roman Reigns Riddle match, and it's going to be on free television instead of having to order a pay-per-view or not order a pay-per-view, but sign up for a streaming service. It's like you're going to get that match on television, and they might look at it that, hey, this event's sold out. It's no longer in a stadium. We're not pushing tickets for it. We did take them off the advertising when we changed the venue. Still, I can imagine many fans upset that if you had planned travel for that Allegiant Stadium show, and then all of a sudden you're getting, a reduced show, you're probably, committed to, your flight and accommodations and such. But if you're a fan at home, it's like you get this on free television.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure ultimately they want to satisfy every fan, and they would probably hope that all the fans watching at home on TV are also ones that are considering subscribing to Peacock, right? I mean, I would have said the same thing in terms of disappointment heading into Hell in a Cell, where I think on that card, I mean, initially they advertised Ronda Rousey and Drew McIntyre and Roman Reigns at
right up until the end. They were part of the advertising. They never took them off.
Totally, yeah. But I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who came out of that show disappointed, and that's something you could say certainly about the level of talent that always ends up delivering on these premium live events.
It is also surgery season in pro wrestling. On Wednesday's Dynamite, they did give the update that CM Punk has undergone surgery on his lower leg, and no timetable revealed, but obviously it's going to be some time with this interim championship there as the prize in the meantime. Cody Rhodes, so originally it was reported this week he was going for surgery on Thursday. WWE was giving out the date of Wednesday throughout Monday's broadcast, but in the latest update from the Observer site was that he is in fact going under surgery today for his torn pectoral tendon. So there you go. And I guess the big question will be, like, once they get in there and perform the surgery, and what kind of timetable is provided, and what kind of rehab program Cody goes through. I'm sure he is going to want to be back as quickly as possible, but you also want to properly rehabilitate this injury. And sometimes you hear stories of guys that just race back, and that's not always the wisest decision. Completely different type of injury, but back when, and there were comparisons of this to Kurt Angle going into WrestleMania that year with Brock Lesnar, and everyone under the assumption that, he's out for a year with neck fusion surgery. He found the alternative remedy with Dr. Joe, and he came back by June and ended up doing damage to the neck, and he had to pretty much go through another procedure later that year. So to me, it's like it's difficult. You never want to be losing time, but it's also an investment to come back as healthy as possible. And if this extends him closer to Mania season, that's a great time to come back.
Absolutely, yeah. If I had Cody, there's absolutely no rush to advance the schedule further than you need to. I think at this point he should really do everything he can to heal up 100%, 110%, 200% if it's possible to make that pec even stronger than before. But the timing exists that allows him for, I think, a pretty typical recovery period for this injury. And then a little more if he wants to be ready for WrestleMania. So there's no rush to reach a WrestleMania season or even a Royal Rumble, in my opinion. I'm a doctor, of course, so you could take my advice beyond whoever he's seeing. So I mean, there's no rush to it. As far as I know, there's no type of experimental surgery when it comes to something like this. So he should take it easy. He left the best way he could have possibly left. And I would argue that if he came back too early, like if he came back in November, he runs the risk of losing a lot of that steam, because we know oftentimes more time for them to build these stories is not always a good thing. If he didn't even show up until WrestleMania, I would argue that he'd probably still be just as hot.
Yeah, that seems long, but I mean, it's just we've seen a wide range of like how you come back. Everybody's going to respond to surgeries and rehab differently, so it's up in the air. But he's going off on such a high point at such a critical time when the company needs stars, and he has really set himself apart, in my opinion.
So, again, the other question is maybe not in the immediate, because he is still recovering, still going through, I'm sure a great deal of very difficult rehab. But how does the WWE attempt to keep his name out there in some way?
I think they should have some update on Raw where it's just like a behind the scenes of him going into surgery, and that like at least an update on Monday. And then I don't know if you can do something every week, and that might be overkill, but checking in sporadically.
This would be the time for a reality show. Yeah. Wouldn't it? Roads back to the top.
Okay. Yes. Give me some time. I'm sure I can come up with a title for that. But did you see the training video that they put out when he was preparing for Hell in a Cell, and they have him in the gym and he's explaining like his workout routine to prepare specifically for the cell? Like you can do a lot of cool stuff from now and get creative and make it part of the show that keeps Cody in, like, he is training for this comeback, and every audience member is aware that he is working for this comeback, and when he comes back, it's a big deal and treat it as such.
It's typically unlike WWE to kind of like let audiences peek behind the curtain to that extent, like at least to the extent of like weekly updates, for instance. I think they're a bit more old school in that they tend to want to keep the mystique of somebody, and there's something to that, of course. But we also know that Cody, is kind of catering to almost a different audience than maybe what the WWE has been used to. He's a guy with, I would say, a pretty big, online presence. He's got his own YouTube channel, of course. So do we see something different from him? Does he go off on his own to maybe shoot something that he puts up there?
The other one I wanted to note as well is that earlier this week, Matt Cardona underwent surgery for his torn biceps, and the NWA has not made it clear what is happening on their pay-per-view this weekend. It was scheduled to be Matt Cardona against Nick Aldis, and they have certainly made it apparent that Matt Cardona will be there at this show, but what is actually going to happen, I guess you have to pay to find out. I hope it does not involve anything physical for a guy fresh off of surgery. But I also think, like, you're going to have fans that after watching last weekend, you're just viewing these people as almost like machines that can do these superhuman things despite whatever injuries they are dealing with. And you've got, like, Jeff Hardy next week. Like, it's just this this baseline that you have of what is doable for these athletes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously every injury is different. And, we are talking about professional wrestling where in order to be a professional wrestler, I don't think you necessarily need to be in the ring. You can be a professional wrestler while you're on Twitter. You can be a professional wrestler while you're doing commentary or while you're hosting a podcast. And Matt Cardona is one of those personalities that I think has a lot more to offer maybe even more to offer outside of the ring, quite frankly, than what he's able to offer in the ring. So I'm sure, they'll find ways to utilize him in the show, even if it's not wrestling.
Right. And coming off of Dynamite, a bunch of news coming out of the show. You can catch our whole review on Rewind to Dynamite, including our dissection of the Casino Battle Royale. That is up there for everybody. But some of the main takeaways from the show, we had Jon Moxley qualifying for to be the AEW representative at Forbidden Door to take on either Hiroshi Tanahashi or Hiroki Goto.
A lot more interest in this Goto Tanahashi match than I'm sure there would be, and I'm sure a lot more people pulling for the underdog here in Goto. To go for the upset. How about it?
This is one of the most interesting matchups that New Japan has booked in some time. I am with you. Like, there's almost like this curiosity of like, they can't, can they?
He'd be the hottest guy. Nobody would see it coming, John.
Oh, maybe there'll be the Goto contingent. I mean, I feel bad. Like, Goto's a tremendous performer. He's just totally slagged here. He is not the star, I guess, that would be expected of a match of this caliber. They have also introduced something sorely needed, and that is a new singles championship for the AEW, international talent to compete for. It is the All-Atlantic Championship, where we will have 4 qualifying matches over the coming weeks that began on Wednesday with Pac beating Buddy Matthews, and then the 4 qualifiers meet in a 4 corners match at Forbidden Door to crown our All-Atlantic Championship. Who will control the ocean from their respective continent?
Right. Yeah.
Or even through other bodies of water that don't quite make its way to the Atlantic. But this is the all-encompassing championship.
Yeah. So this tournament is taking place between talent that is non-American. We've yet to receive any sort of word that this title is limited to that particular, I think, designation. I've seen a lot of people speculate that this might be a title that people might be taking to various promotions that AEW has partnerships with. That's all well and good. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't announce that like right away as you're introducing the championship.
The all promotional championship.
All promotional, sure. Certainly, we poked enough holes at this name, and I think plenty of people have. Why is the flag of China? Why is the flag of Japan on an all-Atlantic championship?
I don't care about the name so much. I care about its existence of this title, and hopefully that I think every title should have a purpose that you explain. Okay, you holding this title means X.
Right.
What does it designate you as?
I mean, European champion, television champion, because I mean AEW itself does not have TBS is technically TNT is technically a TV title, but I suppose this is below that, and their version of the European, which is like the 3rd ranked title.
Will Ospreay appeared on the show along with Aaron Hanare and Aussie Open of the United Empire, so they will be wrestling on Rampage. It'll be Ospreay teaming with Aussie Open against Trent and FTR, and the rest was just setting up Road Rager for next week, which will have Jericho and Ortiz in the hair versus hair match, a tag title ladder match with Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus defending the tag titles against the Hardys and the Young Bucks, Wardlow against 20 security guards in an elimination match, and Canada's Ethan Page against Bulgaria's Miro in the All-Atlantic qualifier next Wednesday in St. Louis.
Yeah, I don't know about Canada's chances in that one.
Yes, we will have to see. Canada's odds are not strong of Canada's ability to keep control of our ocean. He's going into deep waters against Miro.
Yeah, it's a long trip from Bulgaria to the Atlantic, but sure.
Hamilton zone, Ethan Page.
Hamilton versus Bulgaria, that really should be it.
Huge rivalry. I mean, huge.
Classic.
NXT ratings from Tuesday night. The show did 657,000 viewers, a 0.14 in the 18 to 49 demo, finishing 22nd on cable. This was airing against the New York Rangers Tampa Bay Lightning game that did over 2.3 million viewers on ESPN. And overall, they were coming off a very low number the previous week, so they were up 23% in viewers, up 17% in 18 to 49, and up 33% in 18 to 34. So that's positive news for NXT, and it was a show that I think was generally better received than most NXTs. You had the news of Apollo Crews showing up and teasing something as he said, down the road with Braun Breaker. And also worth noting is that on Wednesday, NXT taped their next 2 episodes. So the June 14th and June 21st editions of NXT will be taped shows coming up.
Okay, interesting. You know, when you look at this line from Brandon Thurston's beautiful graphs every single daily almost with these ratings here, I mean, are we noticing any sort of like reasons for these diversions that are content related for NXT, or is it competition based at this point? Like, what do you think?
I think that everything is competition based at the moment. When you have all of the playoffs going on, I think that's a huge factor. NXT though, it's I see it much less impacted by some of the sports competition. Like I think they do have their core viewership, and that's kind of the range they're in. Like we don't see these crazy fluctuations with NXT where they're swinging, from 550 one week to 800 the next. I mean, they're sort of in line with like a much, smaller range that we're seeing diversions from. And I think a lot of that is going to be competition related. And then we'll see once the playoffs end if there's any kind of consistency to NXT 2.0, because we're not that far off from reaching like the 1 year mark in September of the NXT 2.0 concept. And there's no question that there has been a loss of viewership. They have not gotten younger as the show has been geared towards a younger audience. So in that sense, you can certainly see that it has not worked in that sense. At the same time, I do get the feeling that there is a lot of curiosity with this show, that it's almost viewed as, like you've made the comparison way of like this almost feels like it's watching different acts presented, like your last segment on Saturday Night Live, and which acts are going to be brought back in the future and which are going to get dropped. And you have very, for the most part, inexperienced talent that are out there, and you're seeing them sink or swim on live television, and some are going to make it and some are not going to make it. And there is a certain compelling element to that I would say no other wrestling show has to that degree, where you are seeing fairly green talent that is out there, and it's a small, you're either going to sink or swim. That's kind of what it is for so many acts being introduced at once.
Well, I watch it very much, I think, the same way that I used to watch The Ultimate Fighter or a Tough Enough, or an American Idol. Like these are acts that are looking for their big break, and they're giving TV time to try to impress not just the audience, but of course the people that are working back there as well. So to me, there's a constant freshness, and there's always something at stake when you're somebody having your first match on television, for instance, or if you're somebody just a year in looking, to have your first championship match or your first main event on TV. It's a lot more interesting to me for that reason than maybe like the Usos versus the New Day for like the 10th time, where nobody really gains anything in storyline nor in the real world, with whether or not that performance is successful. So, but of course, when you're talking about that, I think you're dealing with a much more limited like audience that typically watches professional wrestling. When I think people who watch professional wrestling typically watch for star power, you're really sacrificing all of that. But again, we talk about what the overall reason for NXT existing is, and I think you can certainly make the argument that this is a more logical way to frame a developmental league.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting as well whenever like the next draft comes up, of like what level of like what characters do they view are ready? Is it going to be a large number that are moved on, and then boom, it's just constantly filling spots? And like I think we've said it many times that the idea of having a character come in and having 3 years to catch on, I think that's going to be very, very few are going to have that length of time. It's going to be much, much shorter, and it's going to be quick. Like, is this person connecting, or do we cut bait now? Are they main roster ready, or are they not? And I think it's going to be a very quick turnaround in the grand scheme of things, where many of these performers, they have been on television for under a year, under 6 months. Roosh did an interview with Lucha Libre Online, and he gave some details about his recent appearance at Double or Nothing. He said, we are still under talks and negotiations. For now, there are just dates as opposed to a full-time contract. I already did the first jump, which is being in the pay-per-view, and not just a segment, but they gave it the value that both Roosh and Andrade have. They left that promo for the end. Nobody expected it. Not even my own family. I think he kept everybody in the dark here. For now, my objective is AEW. I'm now in AEW, and I want to face the biggest names. I want everything. I'm not going for the minimum. You name it. CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, Moxley, Samoa Joe, the best they have to offer. And so a per date deal for Roosh. We have not seen him on television since the Double or Nothing appearance with Andrade. But I mean, this is one more name onto a gigantic roster, and whether, you know, so it's not all that different from like the overall template that we're talking about with NXT, where there are going to be names that come in here, and will they find that time and catch on, or are they going to kind of get lost in the shuffle because there is such a competition for television time? And with Roosh, I think the biggest benefit is that you have this New Japan show coming up, that there's the natural to do something LIJ related on that card.
Certainly, yeah. The timing of that, I mean, lifts Roosh's stock, and the timing of that, you know, a potential LI, simply Los Ingobernables reunion with arguably the three biggest names attached to that faction in one company, it makes him feel like a bigger deal. But beyond that, I mean, it seems like this was very much kind of spearheaded by Andrade, who, I mean, Roosh kind of outed as saying, you know, does not like the Hardy family office or Andrade family office. And I don't blame him. It was a bad fit. I think it was a bad fit for Matt Hardy.
It went nowhere after. It was really just to set up Jeff's return, and since then, like, they've done nothing with it.
No, it's kind of pointless at this point. You cut bait. You let the Bunny and the Butcher and the Blade off on their own to do something. You let Private Party like refine themselves, because whatever they were doing was simply not working. And having Andrade attached to it instead of Matt Hardy didn't really make that big of a difference. So you know, this will, I think, maybe begin the charge potentially of Roosh being tied to Andrade, and maybe his brother coming in as well, and maybe the rest of the family. So you can have a real family office here. But it's always interesting to me to think about like AEW's sort of employment structures and how they operate on per date deals versus, you know, WWE. Obviously it gives them like much more freedom to have guys come and go as they please. It takes away exclusivity, but at the same time, I think we might not necessarily have to be concerned that every single person is going to get a spot, because many of these people are only going to be temporary.
Right. And I think it's just, it would be key that, you know, all sides are on the same page. When you have Roosh throwing out all these big names he wants to work with, I would want more of a commitment if I'm going to dedicate him to a big program with a Joe or a Punk versus a per date deal. So you just want to make sure both sides are going into this with the same expectation of where we're going here. So
and I think much of that will be determined by the audience and how much. I mean, actually, all of it will be dependent on Tony Khan, how much potential I think he sees in, you know, Roosh adding value to his company. But a lot of it has to do with the audience as well. And, you know, I think Roosh might be a big name to, like, you know, a certain section of the audience, but I do think he's like definitely a bit more lower in the pack, in my opinion, of all the free agents that are out there.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, maybe his body of water will find a maybe there'll be a championship. Maybe we'll get him.
Yeah, sure. Why not? The Atlantic is a big ocean.
I just wanted to touch a bit on some of the top fights at UFC 275 this Saturday. There will be a post show here on the Post YouTube channel right after the card with Phil Chertok and Eric Marcotte. It's going to be headlined. This card is taking place from Singapore, so they are 12 hours ahead from the Eastern time zone, but it will be airing at the normal North American time, so a 10 Eastern start for the pay-per-view. So Glover Teixeira, at 42 years of age, won the light heavyweight title last October, defeating Jan Blachowicz, and you've got the interesting dynamic where I would say against most of the contenders at light heavyweight, you're going to find Glover Teixeira as the underdog defending his championship. That is the case where the odds makers have his challenger, Yuri Prohaska, as the favorite going into this fight. And I mean, Glover Teixeira is somebody that, I mean, a tremendous submission game. And I think that's what a lot of people are going to be looking at. These stats for this, I mean, when you look at UFC stats here, Yuri Prohaska, Average strikes landed per minute, 7.19. That is a ridiculous amount. Now, conversely, he absorbs 6.8 strikes per minute. You can see the comparison to Glover Teixeira. So if you have not seen Yuri Prohaska, this is the epitome of a video game fighter. This would be he's got no psychology, if you were critiquing, but an extremely entertaining fighter to watch. He's got some, if you've ever heard his interviews, he has some very interesting philosophies on life. Very, very interesting guy. And I don't doubt that these styles are going to make for a very entertaining fight. Maybe not a long one, because Yuri Prohaska is somebody that is all action. And this is going to be one where this is either a striking just war between these two, and the question will be if Glover gets him down, how Prohaska deals with that aspect of his game, because even at 42, Glover Teixeira, very, very dangerous on the ground, and I think surprised a lot of people that where he was at 42 when he beat Jan Blachowicz last October. The other championship fight sees Valentina Shevchenko going for her 7th title defense of her flyweight title against 19-1 Talia Santos, and this is one where Santos, even with her record, I mean, she has never fought anyone the caliber of Shevchenko. And you always have the caveats that there is going to come a day when a dominant champion shows up and they are less dominant. And that can happen. It happened with Juliana Pena upsetting Amanda Nunes last year. Am I picking Talia Santos to win this fight? Not a chance. But we should never say not a chance in MMA. There is always that probability. But that's pretty much what you've got here with one of the most dominant champions that the UFC has ever had in Valentina Shevchenko, who has just been, outside of the fights with Amanda Nunes, has been pretty flawless in the UFC. And the non-title fight is maybe the most intriguing. It is a rematch from the March 2020 fight between Zhang Weili and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. If you did not see this fight at UFC 248 2.5 years ago, this was you don't have to qualify it by women's versus men's fight. This was one of the best fights in UFC history. An incredible 5-round war. If you saw the images of Joanna Jędrzejczyk after that fight, it was just, she was destroyed visually from this fight. And she has not fought in 2.5 years since that last fight. In the interim, Zhang Weili has fought Rose Namajunas twice, getting knocked out with a head kick and then losing a 5-round decision. So that's the other side of the coin to these big wars like we saw with Robbie Lawler and Rory McDonald. And you leave a huge part of yourself after these fights. And that will be the question in this fight, is how much of both fighters has been affected by that fight, and especially for Jędrzejczyk, who we have not seen at all. But this time it's 3 rounds as opposed to 5, and it was a fairly close fight. Most thought that Zhang Weili won that fight, but there was certainly quite a number of people that scored that fight for Jędrzejczyk. And Dana White has flat out stated that the winner of this fight will challenge Carla Esparza for the strawweight championship. So we will not get a rematch between Carla Esparza and Rose Namajunas, despite, I'm sure, a clamoring after that terrible fight that they recently had. So those are your top fights for Saturday night. And again, the post show will be live Saturday night right after the fights with Phil and Eric.
All right. Excellent little preview there, John.
And Impact tonight, they are getting closer to their Slammiversary card, which is a week from Sunday night that they will have their pay-per-view. Tonight has Josh Alexander against Joe Doring. Eddie Edwards will team with Matt Taven and Mike Bennett of Honor No More, taking on the Motor City Machine Guns and Frankie Kazarian, who I guess is on loan and will be working the pay-per-view. PCO takes on Steve Macklin. And then Tennille Dashwood will be facing Rosemary, and before the Impact has Black Taurus and Crazy Steve against Johnny Swinger and Zicky Dice. What a mixture that is of personalities on Before the Impact, your YouTube exclusive.
I really want to give it up to the graphics team at Impact. They're always reliable. I can always just go up on a Thursday and find these in order of when you read them, at least, John. And
when do you ever have these at this time for Raw and SmackDown?
Never,
at this time.
Never ever. And even the graphics, when you get them, like they're so awfully generic. Look at this. They take the effort of putting different backgrounds on all of these, and
you can look at every photo, and it ranges, but you can look at the photo, and I think you at least have a one-liner about what this guy's about. Like, you can look at Joe Doring and Josh Alexander, and you get a sense of like, okay, we've got the serious wrestler, your champion, and then you've got this wild man that is taking him on. The graphics in wrestling generally don't get enough spotlight. They are the lifeblood of some of these promotional entities.
They do a great job. Yeah.
Yes. I'm hoping next week we should do one news show. I want to maybe get some people together and we do a TNA retrospective show. It's 20 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
We should have some people on. So we'll give it some thought. And next week, look at that as TNA celebrates 20 years of existence. But tomorrow, Wai, who will you be joined by on the new show?
I will be joined by Bruce Lord as John Pollock mans the ship over at the website just for a little bit. Bruce Lord will be joining me here on the Post Daily News Update at 1 p.m. Eastern. That will be available on the cafe feed as well as the free feed on Fridays. We typically like to put that up on the for all the people that aren't subscribed to the cafe. We put that up afterwards as well. So do join us then. But before we get out of here, we got a super chat here from Jake. $2. Thank you very much, Jake, always for the support. He asked, where will we see Namajunas go next, if not a rematch?
She's in a difficult position because I think as long as Carla Esparza is champion, I don't think Rose Namajunas is going to be figured in. I just do not see UFC promoting that rematch. Esparza, though, I mean, it will be interesting, like against either Zhang Weili or there is a great story with Esparza who lost her title to Joanna Jędrzejczyk back in 2015. So if here it is 7+ years later, that rematch happens, that's kind of interesting. But in the meantime, like Pat Barry stated right after the fight that they don't expect Namajunas to take a significant amount of time off. So I imagine she gets a top 5 opponent. And that's probably where you go with Namajunas. I think she's sort of in that, she is young enough that I think she will fight for the championship again, but not imminently. So that's where I see her as a result of that fight, which I do understand. I don't think there's any demand to see that fight again. And if you're the UFC, you do have some other options, whether it be the winner of the Saturday's fight, Marina Rodriguez, as well. Rodriguez is also in the mix for those. So Rose Namajunas, even though she's ranked number 1, she is going to be back a ways in the line.
Tonight, I am back with WH Park for MCU Later, exclusively in the Post Wrestling Cafe. We will be talking about Ms. Marvel, episode number 1, which I just watched last night and I thought was excellent. So, well, plenty of thoughts, everybody.
What time is that tonight?
That'll be after you do yours with him.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking about
he's
something.
double booked tonight. We're
yes.
A lot of WH to come in the next couple weeks.
Always, never enough WH Park out there for all of the Post Wrestling listeners. All right, so tomorrow, Bruce and Wai will be here live at 1 Eastern for the Post Daily News Show, and then Wai and I reunite Friday night, 11 Eastern, after SmackDown and Rampage to go through those shows and take your calls. So postwrestlingcafe.com, jump on board. You get access to all of these bonus shows, including MCU Later tonight, and then Rewind to SmackDown, UFC 275 post show on Saturday, and then WrestleNomics Radio drops on Sunday. So that is it for us. Have a great day and enjoy the weather. Goodbye.